those that are willing to push innovation, those that are willing to invest heavily, test theories, ship product, get it in front of users, are going to find those wins are transformative to their businesses. And so I can see a year from now, we're back to a bit of a race to ensure that we're not just solving for the efficiency problems. We're thinking about revenue opportunities.
As AI comes in, as you get agentic employees, as you get, teams of workers augmenting and supporting and collaborating with the human workers, what does that do to our traditional understanding of accountability, right? I don't think we actually know what to do about the question of whose butt is on the line for a number.
This is an existential threat, but it's also an existential opportunity. And we could cure cancer. There's so many opportunities that you think about space exploration, what we're able to do now with the photos and videos we can take of space and that AI can analyze. The innovation is really exciting. And that's where, we have to work hard to ensure that moves humanity forward.
Ingrid, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, and it's great to be here.
Oh, no, I'm really excited for this conversation. We are going to talk all things AI. We're going to talk about, what is changing in the way teams come together to tackle innovation problems. And this is the hot topic. So I'm really excited to have you here. And I just want to say, hope you're having a wonderful morning, and I hope you're energized to talk about all things innovation.
Absolutely. Super energized. Let's get after it.
And for folks who don't know her, I'm pleased to welcome Ingrid Curtis to Innovators Inside. Ingrid is the CEO of Sparq. And Ingrid, I'm going to actually ask you to explain in your own words what that means and what you do. So would you share a little bit about what you do and kind of how you came to be on the podcast today?
Happy to. Really great to be here. We are, as I think about my career and really how I ended up here at Sparq and who we are, it's been an evolution of consulting and technology and strategy and engineering kind of all coming together. If you think about the challenges that so many companies are facing today, complex business problems with real operating outcomes that they're trying to drive, we've really watched this evolution over the last several decades of how tech can really enable companies to create strategic differentiation amongst their competitive set. And so, I started my career in management consulting, leading technical teams, helping to drive massive implementations of large technology platforms. And frankly, if I look back, those felt overwhelming and very bloated and wildly expensive. And what's exciting about the transformation that's happening now, that's been kind of coming at us over the course of the last 2 decades with agile and with the way in which we're taking these large problems and breaking them down into much more manageable outcomes is we really felt like there was this opportunity to work very closely with our clients to drive greater outcomes than just taking a technical spec and thinking about a solution that they were requesting, but to challenge them on how does this transform your business? How does this really move your organization forward, drive a strategic differentiator, or think about your bottom line? And so Sparq is really an organization that sits at the intersection of strategy and data, engineering, and AI-enabled delivery. And so we're here in both the U.S. and all throughout Latin America, and we're partnering with our clients to drive really, often our clients sit in kind of highly complex operational industries. And so we're working with them not just on the customer-facing technology, but on the technology that's really the heart of the organization that's running their complex ops. And so, we're working transformatively over the last couple of years with all that's come in AI, and I'm excited to kind of talk about that and what we're seeing. But that's where we sit.
I have a lot of empathy for the large scale projects that you can implement, deploy, go through a whole change management process, and then sometimes, in my experience, come out the other end asking, wait, what did we really change in the client account, in the in the customer side, which I've been on. But it seems like things are changing. And so I think my first question for you is, what has been changing in the world of AI? And maybe more importantly, what has been changing in client and customer expectations?
Sure. We've gone through several roller coaster rides over the course of the last even just 5 or 6 years. With COVID, with the impact of speed to market, suddenly there was this arms race to get to AI, and that has led to clients feeling a little bit like hurry up and race, economic impacts, hurry up and save, and back to hurry up and race,
Yep.
right? And so those changing needs and that changing thinking, I think, has led to some of this. First of all, we want to innovate, but how are we innovating and are we getting the ROI for that innovation? Because we did this kind of speed to market play in 2022 and just after things had settled with the early stages of COVID. And I think they recognized that IT budgets had ballooned, but had revenues ballooned. Where was that getting them? How was that differentiating them? And so we're definitely in a position now where I think everybody raced to get a pilot out there. Well, how many of those hit production? We've had this conversation. Everybody, you read anything about AI and it's failure of pilots to get to production. And some of that is they were trying to take shovel-ready projects off the shelf. What already has specifications? What do they already know that they would like to have done? Rather than thinking, what's the most transformative thing I can do for my business right now? What's going to drive that next business opportunity or that next revenue dollar?
You pointed out that a lot of innovators, let's say wannabe innovators, folks that are trying to drive transformation inside their companies, are looking for these what you call shovel ready products. So looking for something that I assume that it's ready to go off the shelf, it's going to start doing, but maybe they're not asking a more fundamental question. They're not asking a more fundamental question, what should I actually be focused on for my business right now? What will change the outcome? Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing and how that is sort of changing in the world of today's AI?
Yeah, I think, if you think about how technology has worked in the past, there's the office of the CIO, there's IT spend, there's a much larger operational budget and operational spend, and then there's certainly some, marketing, customer experience. And as you think about how projects would follow that life cycle, the business would ideate on something that they're interested in. There would be tickets or pain points or something that they're looking for that would then pass to IT to execute. And I think as you see that changing, we kind of went through these moments of shadow IT where, different departments would pick up and buy software or engage in efforts. And I think now is a moment where we're reevaluating that landscape and how, in the conversations we're having with clients, it's how do we really partner with the business and IT to drive the right solution? And so you think about it's not as clean cut of here's a problem that we want to solve in this one part of an operational workflow. You really need to take a step back and look at the entire workflow that the business is undertaking. What are the ways in which we should not just rethink that one moment, but think bigger about what the impact could be?
Well, I mean, that's actually really interesting because if you're looking at, let's say, one piece of a workflow and you're like, I want to optimize this thing or I want to automate this thing, you actually have a preconceived notion of your solution, right? And you haven't actually stepped back and said, what is the actual problem that matters, which is very fundamental to even the
Yeah.
word innovation. It's something that I see people skip over all the time. But I want to push on this because people have been skipping over that step for
Yeah.
as long as I've been in business, which is I'm balding. It's been a while. So you know, is there anything in terms of your customers' understanding or expectations of technology today that is letting you reframe this conversation with them? Something that has changed over the last few years?
Well, if you think about what AI makes possible, now that the major lift is not the engineering of the zeros and ones, right? It is actually the strategy. It's actually the
Yeah.
consulting. It's decision making. It's rethinking how the business engages in that technology. That leads you to a kind of different conversation. And as AI was coming out, we're seeing what Claude and some of these models, OpenAI and others, were capable of. We quickly realized that's the new tech debt. Anyone can create an application to do anything. Well, now, environments are filled with applications that might address existing workflows. But as you have seen, the transformation AI in just one year Forget going back two. Let's just go back 1 year, where we were a year ago, to where we are now, to where agents will be a year from now. You rethink that workflow and you say, today we build software with extensive UIs. Tomorrow, an agent doesn't need a UI. I don't need massive UIs for someone in the marketing department to engage with an application. I might just need a prompt that they can speak to. We have products like talk to your data ideas of you need to be able to talk to your data. And I think that changes everything about what you're thinking about building.
Well, it really does, but it raises this other interesting conundrum, which is like we feel this in our business at Alchemist. And it's the conundrum of when do I actually take a beat and, think about not just what our problem set is, but architecting some new solution, some new capability. Because to your point, if I had done something 8 months ago, I would not be deploying complex agentic workflows and kind of a mixture of experts modes in production. Now this is default out of the box stuff in Claude Code. So how do you navigate the question of when is the right moment to strike in terms of deploying AI and technology against the business?
Yeah, it is a very new way of thinking. So if you think about the iterations that we've gone through, like waterfall projects, where let's do business process reengineering. Let's think through everything before we even begin. Then let's start to document all that. Then we build, then we test, then we go live. Agile really took that process and just shortened it. We just took small bites at a time, but it was really effectively what baby waterfalls, right? It wasn't that much different in how you thought about building software. And I think now, as people are sitting down to say, okay, what do I want to accomplish? Even as we start to build today, the need 6 weeks from now, 8 months from now is going to be different. And so that process of engineering and development has to be able to iterate with the times. It has to be, we're getting to this place where software will become much more living and breathing. As you're building and deploying, we can deploy software every day, multiple times a day. But it forces the founder or entrepreneur or business leader to really sit back and say, what is the strategy? What am I trying to drive for the organization? Not just, yes, I've got old code that needs modernized, or this is, an automation opportunity because it's frustrating, people, and it takes 6 extra hours a day. You really have to take a step back to really the kind of true consulting and say, all right, how does this impact our end customer? How does it drive more revenue? Is it worth cracking open, or is there another problem we call problem zero? Like, what is problem zero that's the most that would be the most impactful to your business if you could solve that? And I think it's going to lead leaders to prioritize innovation and really put an ROI on why would you crack something open? What is it you're going to be impacting, and how does that impact the business?
Look, this makes fundamental sense to me, right? I mean, you're not speaking an idea that is horribly complex. It's fundamentally know what your purpose is, what matters in your business, and then let's apply the modern technologies, the best capabilities to solve it, right? But it's actually remarkably challenging, I think, for people to do.
Well, we've built organizations. I mean, you think about complex enterprise level, thousands of employees, to take massive problems, break them down into teeny silos, and each of those silos is delivering on a result that impacts, the one above it. These organizations are not flat, newer thinking, living, breathing operations. And so it is going to be very disruptive to how do you look at a large enterprise and move them forward. ELTs, we're seeing with our clients where you talk to the ELT members, you talk to executive CEOs, even the SLT leadership level, and they get it. Software is going to change. The future of AI is going to change everything. Well, then as you start to get layers into the organization, there's this hesitancy of like, I don't see the big picture. Not just it's going to take my job, but there's risk, there's governance, there's so many problems and challenges that's where I think some of these operational improvements and these innovations stall. Because when you actually get to the ground level, our clients are really struggling with all the details of the impact to the business.
Yeah, and I always think about this as kind of the stuck middle, right? you get all of these folks that are frankly put in a pretty challenging situation because they don't see, or at least they certainly don't have control over the bigger
Yep.
vision, but they have a lot of accountability for something that needs to happen tomorrow. It's a tough spot to be. But the thing that's really interesting that you're pointing out, that I'll be honest, from a Silicon Valley perspective, actually sounds a little counterintuitive. You're pointing out that on top of and perhaps in advance of this magical technology layer that's going to make all of our lives easier, there is a very human consultative set of decisions that have to be made. And I think I don't know, I talk to a lot of people who seem to believe that AI, writ sufficiently large and with a sufficiently large data set, magically makes all of that go away. It hasn't been my experience. But do you run into that mindset? Do you run into that belief? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at some of the most innovative companies in our history, if we just rely on AI to give us the insights in the next business opportunity or the next revenue dollar, it's not strategically differentiated. We're all working with the same models. We have similar data. And so if you look at two companies that are equal competitors, it's the human in that loop that's going to think about what are those creative ideas? What is that opportunity? And we've taken some of the burden of implementing the supporting technology out, but it's leading us to say we talk a lot about how AI is going to take all these jobs, and it's like, well, if you look across the work that many people are doing, there's a lot of people in enterprise level jobs that I would say they don't go home fulfilled. They're working, bills of lading, and they're processing documents, and they're doing jobs that don't require their creativity, that just require their administrivia. And I think it's exciting to be able to create a new way in which those same individuals are working in a much more creative, thoughtful, higher impact opportunity. And I do think that's where there is so much transformation that's coming, but it's not yet known. There will be, what we're seeing with clients is they're picking off the easy kind of low hanging fruit innovation opportunities. Okay, we can document ingestion and we can solve that problem over there. Okay, great. Let's do that. But the
Yeah.
transformation for that
And we can
business.
measure, a couple points of cost savings, or we can measure a couple points of efficiency, or a couple more nines in quality. They're incremental.
Exactly. But you're not going to cut your way to growth. You have to be thinking, and that's where the great creativity is going to come from the people that are really working in those businesses, not from AI.
Well, let's talk about where this is working and where it isn't working. I mean, you said something interesting earlier, which you said that there's this belief that many of the AI projects out there are failing. And there was, I think it was an MIT study last fall that said 90+% of projects fail. And honestly, that kind of drives me insane because I live in my entire world is iterative failure that eventually leads to success, right? So I look at that and I say, wait, if 90% of these projects are failing, uh, these executive teams are actually doing something right. They're taking some risk. They're hopefully learning from the failures. Um, but what is your view? Like you're working with these organizations all up and down the Americas. Where is AI making an impact today for large scale innovation? And maybe where are people trying, but it's just not ready, or organizations aren't ready? Can you kind of help frame that up for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the data, it's having the most significant impact in coding, in engineering, right? The ability to write code and
Yep.
build applications. Then you can look at some of the more administrative. I mentioned doc ingestion. Like those are some of the low hanging fruit. As you think about the deeper problems, and there's innovation happening I think AI will have a huge impact on healthcare and how we're, even from a radiology, from a disease perspective. But if you look at businesses that are thinking about how it might help them to transform what they do, what they deliver for their clients, it's rarely seen in these enterprises at deep inside of operational systems. It's specific things that they can pick off and transform and gain dollars and cents. And so I do think that we have yet to even scratch the surface of what's possible. When you think about consumption, if it was going so well, OpenAI and Anthropic would not be creating services firms. They would not be investing so heavily to try and drive that consumption, because what they're realizing is
That's a really interesting
no
framing.
one's making enough progress. We're going to make partners, and they've picked off their large global consultancies. We're an Anthropic partner. However, they're saying that's not, it's even that isn't fast enough. The only way for us to grow and scale, and they got to feed the beast, right? These are very capital intensive businesses. To feed the beast, they need to feed consumption, and that tells you that broad scale across the board, we're not leveraging AI in a huge way yet.
Or at least it's not working enough that they have confidence that the spend is going to continue, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of conversation about spend and cutbacks and budgets ballooning out of control. That honestly, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? I mean, sure, I think as a one-off, yes, you may have a department, you may have a company that realize they need to get costs under control, but I think to your point, um, AI seems to be bringing out in everyone this realization that they are remembering, no, you can't cut your way to growth, and in fact we actually have a massive productivity booster. So the idea that we are just trying to feed the beast to feed the beast doesn't ring super true to me. So what's the unlock, right? If we believe that actually the technology is there that lets us fundamentally rethink large swaths of how we operate our businesses, but we haven't quite gotten there. What's the unlock that you're waiting for?
Yeah, well, I think this is a change and transformation management question, right? Like, how do you really roll this into organizations? And so what we're doing with clients is really taking problem zero and in a reasonable bite, saying we're going to take that from problem zero to go live in 90 days. And rather than testing, rather than, we saw this, we have what we call the shop internally. It's this gritty space where people can test AI, they're building products, they're learning as they're going. And so what we found in there was almost too much iteration. You were building, and not shipping. And so you start to think about that. Well, that's what clients are seeing too.
Not shipping or not testing, or is that the same thing?
Shipping testing to me is I got a user who's trying to leverage that product, an actual user who would use that in their day to day. That to me is shipping. And even if it's in a safe space, there was almost this iterative, like, well, I can improve this part and I can improve this part. It's like, time out, no more, no more dollars going into. I want it in front of users. Pause. When users have used it and come back with feedback, then we can talk about the next iteration of investment. And I think it's the same with clients. They built all these pilots. That group, somebody over there, is testing that, but that feedback never comes back to a aggressive push to get that live. And I think we have to build in. We have a framework that we use called ACT, and it's kind of awareness, capability, and trust. So you have to ensure that as you're thinking about how you're building these solutions, we need to know what the system knows about the business. What are the signals? What's that context and data? When we then think about the capability, what is the system? What do we intend for that system to actually do? What's the workflow? What's the reasoning? But trust is really, how do we make it safe to run in production? Governance, observability, accountability. And too many of those questions are unanswered. We're throwing a pilot in front of someone in marketing or someone in a department, and it's just cycling. And so in the shop, we really learned that, no, we have to get all the way from start to finish, go live, get it in front of users, and stop, hands off. And part of that was, as you think about these larger problems for clients, you have to get used to a new way of working. And a new way of working is, while Agile pushed the timeline to shorten, it didn't necessarily create this living, breathing thinking about software. And that's where I think we're headed, is really guiding our clients to take off size, a reasonable bite, get it live, then come back and get into a new way of thinking about these AI solutions. There's a lot of fear. We have to think of the change management side of fear, and that is really to show people the results that are possible. And you can kind of watch it on clients' faces. It's like, no, 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 no. We get something like we've done loyalty programs. We've done like take a small version of that, get it live, and they hear back from users and they're like, oh, okay, all right, this is working. This is the way to do it. And so I do think that it is, we're changing how we're building software, but we're also, we've got to kind of be obsessed with shipping product in a way that gives us that feedback.
I love the ACT framework. I think that's something that I hope people kind of internalize. And it occurs to me that what you are advocating that organizations do is fundamentally the same process that, say, venture funding follows when building a startup, right? Like you get a certain amount of funding to say you're going to hit a milestone. And that milestone is usually not just writing a line of code. It's putting into some production, learning something, proving something so that you can go ask for the next tranche of funding. And it is a mindset that works, but it does also require something of, we call it an entrepreneurial mindset, but it requires you to think about a project in distinct phases rather than having to design everything up front. And that's hard. That is very, very hard when you are an organizational leader that has quite a lot on the line if something goes wrong in a project. So you talk about change management, you talk about culture. What are the tools in your tool belt, in Sparq's tool belt, that help allay some of these concerns, that help folks embrace maybe a little bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah. I mentioned the shop, and it is this creative place, but it's more like less of a, the safe R&D, slow, more like a, wood shop or a shop where we're breaking things on a regular basis, right? And so we want them to push hard, we want them to push fast, and it's been interesting, I think, because there's certainly as engineers are facing the transformation of their day, right, and how they work. There's kind of this life cycle they go through. You could watch them like, I've started to use it to help me. I'm prompting. It's helping me, solve a problem. Then they continue to move up the stack until they're really orchestrating the development of, all of that code by through the model. And as we've seen that transformation, I think what we're recognizing is you can tell them all day long that this is going to be innovative and that this is good for you and it's going to be great for engineering and think of all that you can accomplish. But until they get their hands on it and really try that theory out, and I think that applies to organizations. Until we give people in every department access to some of these solutions, we saw it with our finance team. They were like, okay, how do we use it? And we walked them through some use cases and kind of pushed them on. We're not going to get a system over here. You're going to leverage Claude to test your financial reporting. Literally, my CFO was like, "This is amazing! Like, this is what we're doing now, and here, and the excitement I think is compelling because it gets back to the job creation, job deletion. People want to be engaged and energized and excited about the work they do, and this is giving that creative option. And I think organizations have to be comfortable with. We need to get it out there and let people test and try things.
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned your CFO because, like, I could see delight in the eyes of our CFO as she first started iterating a dashboard with Claude in Excel. Right? Yep. This is somebody who understands our business inside out, understands the complexity of all kinds of tools. But you could see the delight actually, right? And it turns out that little project didn't actually work. We ended up in like one of those messes of spaghetti that happens sometimes when you iterate too much using these LLMs, but it almost doesn't matter because it opened her eyes to, what might be possible in pretty simple ways. That is a complex change management thing in a large organization.
You highlighted something interesting that I was having this great conversation with one of our colleagues, and he was sharing kind of raw feelings about how he felt about working with AI. And I just really value when our colleagues are willing to step up and kind of share their insights. And it really hit me. You mentioned like we kind of over iterated. We got to this place where it wasn't useful. And he referred to it as doom scrolling. Like there's days where I'm engineering and I'm iterating and it feels like I'm doom scrolling. And that's part of what we're talking about is stop. You at some point, it is good enough, right? We talk about 85% is good enough. Like there is a moment where you have to get it off out in front of users and stop iterating, because the models are still in a place where that's a very likely scenario where you end up almost doom scrolling with code.
It's such a fun metaphor, actually. I hadn't actually thought of it, but yes, I have felt that feeling as well. I can emotionally resonate with your colleague there, where I've just gone a little bit too far down the rabbit hole. And then I've realized that, oh, whoops, we may have taken a left turn at some point here. But to that point of, you've got to get it out there. There are a lot of organizations that are out there attempting to help companies become truly AI native, right? That are also helping them attempt to realize the promise of AI. So, I think Chamath talks about his 80-90 incubator, right? Like 80% of the functionality, 90% off on cost. And it's a set of guiding principles. I would argue that I don't think I've actually seen a company operating in a truly AI native way yet. I've seen people layering AI on workflows. I've seen people building pieces of their stack, particularly around support, customer engagement, some back office, using pretty interesting AI technologies. But I don't think I understand what an AI native company actually is yet. I don't know if anybody does. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you paint your clients a picture of what an AI native company could look like?
So we have some great innovators in house who are really thinking through this problem. And when we faced the agile transformation and how we were thinking about the way in which we build software, there was an agile manifesto. There was a clear guidance, and so we could all kind of build our flavor of it. But we had this that's the North Star we're going to all attempt to aim at. We don't really have that today. And so as organizations think about how they're going to change, how they really become AI fluent and AI native, there's no roadmap and there's no textbook and there's no training class. Everyone is theorizing and testing at the same time. But what's coming out of our team is, and I have a tendency to oversimplify, and my team is fantastic in rolling with it. But there's this concept of kind of evidence-based work. And I think of it simplistically of, if you're trying to build an application, right? So let's just say we've figured out that this workflow here, we want to come in and transform. And there's some things right now that are known. There's other decisions that are yet unknown or undecided. And what's different is, I think of it as like kind of a bar chart, right? And so all the bars are raising at different speeds and different levels. But we can build anything that is known, we can build right now. And we can be okay with that's 35% done, that one's 37% done. And there is this ability to say, okay, that 37% in that space is good enough for go live. Like that is good enough to ship. And then we'll iterate from 37% to 85 or 100% for the end user. That is not a way in which we really think as organizations. I think the other part of this is, with so much change happening every week, every 2 weeks, with new models that are rolling out and new ways in which agents are useful, it's hard to kind of paint that future. And so we keep getting started, then transforming, getting started, then transforming. And maybe the model shouldn't roll anything out for a moment and just give everyone a chance to catch their breath and get up to speed and fix governance and fix some of the security concerns. But it is I think it's inherently a risk in that if we're just always changing the way we're focused on things, we're not really teaching organizations new ways of working. And that's where I would agree with you. I don't really believe that I see any organization that's truly AI native. And even as we're on the cutting edge and taking that learning back, from both in-house with our clients and with our teams inside the shop, we even still catch ourselves going back to old tenets and having to push ourselves to say, we don't need to do it that way anymore, right? And so there is this, there's just this transformation that's going to continue to happen over the next 18 to 24 months as organizations really figure out a new way of working.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I can't figure out from sort of a organizational transformation perspective is, are we going to see a shift in accountability? Right? I can't claim credit for this thought. It was a gentleman I was talking to at a conference a number of months ago, you know, sort of stated the obvious, but the implications are completely non-obvious to me, right? The obvious that, hey, as AI comes in, as you get agentic employees, as you get, teams of workers augmenting and supporting and collaborating with the human workers, what does that do to our traditional understanding of accountability, right? In a lot of organizations, you get a very hierarchical org chart, right? And like accountability just kind of ladders up and you have a human who's responsible for the sales team's performance. As organizations get flatter, I don't think we actually know what to do about the question of whose butt is on the line for a number in an agentic world. Does this come up with your clients or internally at Sparq at all?
I think a lot about this, especially because I believe that as a CEO, um, my job is up and out, right? I'm here to be working with clients, to be thinking about the market, to be looking ahead. Um, but in deep moments of such transformation, you also have to kind of step back in it and see what's actually happening on the ground level. And that's where I think, you think about the accountability models. Well, because that used to kind of roll uphill, um, you either require strategic guidance from the top that's then, there's all these kind of old models that required highly complex, strong communication planning, accountability. We would get all the way to like performance reviews that tied back to the corporate strategy. And I think that has to change. I think we have to think of, kind of a hub and spoke and some of the difference in how this all works, going to much more kind of grassroots efforts that colleagues on the ground are given the autonomy and the challenge of specific outcomes that they drive. And then therefore that is, they're building their own accountability inside that cycle. And look, I don't think we have this answered yet. I think you look at the last 40 years, companies have stepped up and tried to break that hierarchical, to think differently, to have different autonomous, and I don't know that any have truly worked. I think there's naturally in humanity this need for guidance and control, and so I think it'll be interesting to see who emerges. There's plenty of academic views in space, but do any of those old models or do some new models exist that we may say might work in the future with AI?
I'm usually a really like glass half full, like speak in the language of positivity person, but sometimes you just need to know who to blame too, right? And it's really hard to blame an agent. Like, do you fire your agent? I mean, I guess you can, but this strikes me as one of the most fundamental questions that I don't think you plan for. I think you kind of stumble into it. But like this is way murkier to me than the technological roadmap of LLMs or scaffolding or orchestration. It's way murkier to me than what's going on in enabling hardware. It's actually how humans are going to respond.
Yeah, and I do think that's where Anthropic and OpenAI and investing in services and trying to drive consumption, like we'll drive some of that up. But if we were to solve for some of that accountability model, inherently some of that solves itself, right? Right now we can force some of these, new applications and things on organizations. But if organizations were able to transform and kind of unmuddy those waters, I do think that a lot of this innovation would happen more naturally.
This is really fascinating. We've kind of touched a little bit on technology, a lot on organizational change. I want to ask you to sort of continue to look up and out. I want to ask you to look a little forward into the future. Um, if you could wave a magic wand and all of a sudden, you know, that magic wand would generate the perfect client who is prepared to work with Sparq optimally to, do whatever they need to do, but up level their capabilities through technology. What would that client look like? And what would the first conversation with that client be?
If I look at my past experience and I kind of apply that to this question, um, some of the more raw, willing, open, transparent clients that have kind of laid their challenges out in front of us, and been willing to be vulnerable and say, all right, here's where we think we want to go. We not only need to get there, we need to test the theories as we get there. I think we've seen the greatest success. There are times where clients are really protective of insight and kind of want you to just, here, take this sliver, right? And I think it's the same, applies back to the conversation we're having. If you just ask your employee to think about the sliver of the business, you're missing out on their thinking and thought process on the bigger problem. And so ideal clients for us are companies that are willing to really be vulnerable, share their challenges, think creatively with us. We love to get in. I mean, some of the greatest successes we've had have been in these discovery moments. Like, we had a client come to us and say, "Hey, we sell they sell equipment, tools, things that are used on job sites." And they said, "We believe that we want to provide data back to our clients of how they use these tools." And we were like, "Okay, so we could build you a dashboard and portal, and your clients can log in and check out how this drill and that whatever the tool might be doing is used all day." We said, "But time out. Let us go walk a bunch of job sites and talk to your clients and challenge that theory." And in those moments, what we found in that case was our client was like, these end users were like, I don't care how much the drill is used. I care when it walks off the job site. And so that was a perfect example of being willing to allow us to challenge their assumptions, helped us to come back and say, actually, I think you're heading the wrong direction. I don't think that's the product you want to build. I think you need a geofencing solution for your tools. And that's where we can come to the humanity of creativity and the willingness to work together. And I think that's what AI is going to take, is being willing to kind of open the kimono, crack open any area of the business, and not just think in small doses, but think big. Those are clients that I get excited about, because I think we can really help be transformative.
And if we were to circle back a year from now, what do you think would be different about the world we're operating in?
It's a great question. A year is a long time. I think that there's been this whole question of software and services and the line blurring and who's going to prevail and how are we going to help clients solve problems. I think because everyone's kind of facing the same challenge at the same time, similar to what we did in COVID, right? Innovation there wasn't this speed to market that was happening. I think that pressure is going to continue to rise over the course of the next 12 months. Those that are willing to push innovation, those that are willing to invest heavily, test theories, get, like I said, ship product, get it in front of users, are going to find those wins are transformative to their businesses. And so I can see a year from now, we're back to, a bit of a race to ensure that we're not just solving for the efficiency problems. We're thinking about revenue opportunities, and really, clients are going to expect that the work that they're investing in is catapulting them into the next stratosphere.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, this really is a system shock. I love how you keep equating AI, frankly, to COVID in many ways. Like, it is. It's an externality that is a major system shock impacting all of us at the same time. Hopefully we can look at it in a more positive light, but it is a system shock. It'll be really interesting to sort of see how it plays out. And for me, it'll be interesting to see what the duration, of sort of the acute phase of this shock is. Right? Because I got to tell you, I have trouble imagining what's next. I mean, we can talk forever about like new capabilities enabled by functional quantum computing and things like that. But,
we haven't even opened the door to quantum. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but it honestly, it makes me nervous because this is such a potentially transformative set of technologies that are touching sort of not just our organizations, but ourselves as people up and down. It scares me a little. Think about what's next. But I like that framing. I like that framing of this is a shock that we have to figure out.
Well, and look, I always say, one of the things I tell our colleagues is this is an existential threat, but it's also an existential opportunity. And we could cure cancer. There's so many opportunities that I mean, you think about space exploration, what we're able to do now with the photos and videos we can take of space, and that AI can analyze. I mean, the innovation is really exciting, and that's where we have to work hard to ensure that moves humanity forward.
Yeah. Well, on that note, which is absolutely positive and aspirational and leads to the sci-fi world I want to live in, Ingrid, I want to say thank you for coming on Innovators Inside. It's been an absolute pleasure. For any of our listeners who are interested in following along with your work, with Sparq's work, et cetera, where should they find you? Are you on LinkedIn? Go to the corporate website? What's the best place for them to look?
Yeah, so we are at teamsparq.com. Come check us out. And I am on LinkedIn, Ingrid Curtis. I think it's Ingrid M. Curtis on LinkedIn. So look forward. And I try and share my raw insights and thoughts out there. And this evolution will continue.
We'll get all that linked in the show notes. With that, I just want to say thanks again. Really appreciated you coming on the pod today. It's been super fun.